My name is Chloe Bennett. I'm 30 years old. And the strange thing about finally leaving someone who never really chose you is that the relationship doesn't die on the night you walk away. It dies earlier, quietly, in some half-overheard sentence, in some casual laugh you were never supposed to hear, in the tiny humiliations you kept calling misunderstandings because admitting the truth would have shattered you too soon. Last Thursday was supposed to be our anniversary dinner. 2 years with Ethan Mercer. 2 years of loving a man who knew exactly how to look committed in public when it benefited him. 2 years of being patient, flexible, understanding. 2 years of mistaking convenience for devotion. Our reservation was at 8 o'clock at an upscale steakhouse downtown, the same place we'd had our first date. White tablecloths, candlelight, dim amber lamps that made everybody look softer than they really were. Ethan liked places like that, places where he could lean back in his chair, flash that effortless grin, and look like a man who had his life together. He was supposed to meet me there. He didn't, but that isn't where this story starts. It starts 2 weeks earlier, at his friend Nolan's birthday party, in the sticky golden haze of a rooftop bar, where music was just loud enough to blur edges and just soft enough to let the truth slip through. Ethan had asked me to come because, in his words, it'll mean more if you're there. That should have made me feel special. Instead, looking back, I think I was just useful, a polished detail, a woman beside him who made him look settled. That night, I was standing near the bar waiting for our drinks, an old-fashioned for him, tequila soda for me, when I heard his voice from the other side of a divider lined with fake ivy and string lights. He was with Nolan, Derek, and Mason. They didn't know I was close enough to hear. "So," Mason said, laughing into his beer, "what's the plan with Chloe? You actually serious about her, or are we still pretending?" Ethan laughed. Not awkwardly, not defensively, not the kind of laugh a good man gives before saying, "Don't talk about my girlfriend like that." It was relaxed. Easy. And then he said, "Chloe's great. Sweet, loyal, low drama. She's comfortable." Comfortable. Such a harmless word on the surface, such a brutal one, somehow, in the wrong tone. Nolan snorted. "Comfortable is what you call a couch, man, not the woman you're dating." Ethan took a sip of his drink. "You know what I mean." Derek said, "What about Serena?" At that name, something inside me shifted. Serena Cole, his ex-girlfriend. The woman who, according to Ethan, was ancient history, emotionally exhausting, and completely irrelevant now. And yet somehow her name never stayed buried for long. Ethan exhaled through his nose like he was amused and annoyed all at once. Serena was different. Mason gave a low whistle. Different how? There was a beat of silence. Then Ethan said, "Serena was the kind of girl you picture when you think about Endgame. Chloe." He paused, and even now I remember how cold my hands felt around those 2 sweating glasses. "Chloe's who you're with while you figure things out." All 3 of them laughed. I didn't. I stood there frozen, the bartender calling out someone else's tab, music pulsing under my skin, and for one insane second I thought maybe I had misheard him. But then Nolan said, "So she's a placeholder?" And Ethan, my boyfriend of 2 years, the man who kissed me goodbye every morning and let me meal prep for him on Sundays and said things like, "You know me better than anyone," answered without hesitation. Basically. My chest caved in so fast it almost felt physical. Placeholder. Not girlfriend, not partner, not the woman he loved. A temporary solution. A warm body in the seat until the real thing arrived. Derek laughed into his drink. "Damn. And she's over there probably thinking you're planning a ring." Ethan chuckled. "Relax. Chloe likes stability. As long as I keep showing up, she's happy." That one hurt worse. Because part of me knew exactly why. I had been happy with scraps. Happy with almost. Happy with whatever version of commitment he felt like offering. I looked down at the drinks in my hands and realized I was shaking. I should have marched over there, thrown the tequila soda in his face, broken up with him in front of all his friends. That's what the stronger version of me would have done. But heartbreak doesn't always make you loud. Sometimes it makes you quiet. Sometimes it makes you observant. Sometimes it turns you into a witness inside your own life. So I walked back to him. I handed him his drink. He smiled up at me like nothing had happened. "Took you long enough." I smiled back. Not because I forgave him. Not because I was okay. Because in that exact moment, I wanted him to keep talking. I wanted to see what my life looked like now that illusion had cracked. The next 2 weeks were awful in the most ordinary way. No screaming, no confrontation. Just detail after detail rearranging itself into a truth I could no longer ignore. I noticed he only posted photos of us if he looked especially good in them. In most pictures, I was half turned away, cropped at the shoulder, or blurred in the background. His social media read like a single man cosplaying maturity. Gym selfies, work wins, group shots, brunch, concerts. No mention of me unless I improved the aesthetic. His phone contact for me was Chloe Home with a little house emoji. I asked him once, trying to sound casual, why am I saved like a utility bill? He laughed and kissed my forehead. Because you're home. Don't make it weird. At the time, I let myself melt over that answer. Now I think about the fact that Serena was still saved as Serena Fire with a flame emoji. That should have told me everything. He postponed our plans whenever something better appeared. Always with that same spoiled confidence that I'd understand. Baby, Nolan got us into this members-only event. Can we do dinner tomorrow? Derek's cousin got last-minute floor seats. Rain check? My boss wants to do drinks. You don't mind, right? I always minded. I just didn't want to be the difficult girlfriend. Funny how women can be taught to betray themselves just to avoid being called inconvenient. The anniversary dinner had been my idea. I made the reservation a month in advance at his favorite steakhouse, told him I had something special planned. He seemed excited, or at least performed excitement convincingly enough that I let myself hope. The day of, he texted me at 3:02 p.m. Work thing ran long. Might be a little late. Start without me if you need to. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, no problem, see you there. I arrived at 7:45. I wore the black dress he once said made me look dangerous in a good way. Soft makeup, gold hoops, heels that pinched by the time I crossed the lobby. I remember catching my reflection in the restaurant mirror and thinking, absurdly, that I looked like a woman who still believed in her own relationship. I sat down. The waiter congratulated me when I said I was celebrating an anniversary. I thanked him with a smile so polished it almost passed for real. At 8:15, Ethan texted, on my way. Traffic's a nightmare. Order for me. You know what I like. I did know what he liked. Medium rare ribeye, truffle fries, old-fashioned with one large cube, validation without effort, loyalty without reciprocation, a woman who wouldn't embarrass him by having limits. I didn't order for him. Instead, I ordered for myself. The Wagyu special. The expensive bottle of wine he always said was too much for one dinner, a side of roasted mushrooms, and for the first time in longer than I care to admit, exactly what I wanted. At 8:29, another text. Parking is insane. Why would you pick a place this difficult? That one almost made me laugh. Why would I pick a place? The place we'd both loved. The place where he had once told me, over candlelight and bourbon, that he'd never met anyone who made him feel so understood. I set my phone face down. Then I opened Instagram. My hand was steady when I posted the photo. My wine glass lifted toward the candlelight, city lights blurred behind it, the edge of my untouched second place setting just visible in frame. The caption read, celebrating 2 years of lessons, clarity, and finally recognizing my own worth. Here's to new beginnings, and to never being anyone's placeholder again. I tagged the restaurant, and I tagged him. My phone erupted almost instantly. Missed call, missed call, missed call. I turned it off. Then I ate my dinner while it was hot. And for the first time in 2 years, I didn't arrange myself around Ethan's lateness, mood, hunger, ego, or convenience. I just existed. It felt like grief. It also felt like oxygen. By the time he arrived, it was 8:47. He came in fast, jaw tight, coat half-buttoned, expression already sharpened for a fight. He looked good, of course. Ethan always looked good when he was about to make someone else feel small. But when he saw the nearly finished plate in front of me, the empty chair across from mine, and the dessert the waiter had just brought out, a complimentary chocolate torte with a single candle burning in the center, his whole face changed. What the hell, Chloe? I looked up slowly. Oh, I said, you made it. He stopped at the table, breathing hard. Are you insane? What was that post? I took a sip of wine before answering. Which part upset you? The self-respect or the accuracy? His eyes flashed. Take it down. No. People are already texting me. That sounds stressful. He pulled the chair out so hard it scraped the floor. A few nearby diners glanced over. Good. Let them. This is because of what you heard at Nolan's party, he hissed. I tilted my head. Interesting that you knew exactly which betrayal I meant. His mouth tightened. Chloe, it was a joke. No, I said quietly. It was honest. That's why it worked. He sat down hard and leaned toward me. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Am I? Yes. I studied him for a second. The expensive watch, the perfect hair, the irritation, not guilt, not remorse, just irritation, that I had created consequences for him. Then I said, "Tell me I imagined it. Tell me I didn't hear you call me a placeholder while your friends laughed." He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried a different angle. "You don't understand guy talk." I actually laughed then, softly enough to make him angrier. "And you never understood what it meant to be loved by a woman who would have gone to war for you." The waiter approached, clearly sensing tension. Ethan tried to order, but the kitchen was already closing. Something about that detail felt poetic. He looked at me like this, somehow, was my fault too. I stood, picked up my purse, and smoothed down my dress. "Chloe," he said, lower now. Dangerous in that way men get when charm stops working. "Sit down." I looked at him for a long moment, and then I said, "No, I'm done being convenient." Outside, the night had teeth. Cold air hit my bare shoulders the second I stepped out of the restaurant, but it felt cleaner than the air inside. Cleaner than the lies. Cleaner than the last 2 years of explaining away things I should have treated as warnings. Behind me, I heard Ethan shove through the front doors. "Chloe!" I kept walking. My heels struck the pavement in sharp little beats, each one sounding steadier than I felt. "Are you seriously doing this?" he snapped, catching up beside me. "You're going to humiliate me in public and then just walk away?" I stopped beside my car and turned to look at him. It's strange what your face does when your heart finally stops defending someone. Everything becomes obvious. The entitlement, the disbelief, the way they really thought your silence meant permission. "I'm not humiliating you," I said. "I'm reacting to who you've been when you thought I couldn't hear you." He dragged a hand through his hair, already frustrated that I wasn't crying, wasn't shouting, wasn't doing the messy kind of pain he knew how to manipulate. "Chloe, come on, it was a dumb comment at a party." "A dumb comment?" I repeated. "You called me a placeholder. You're fixating on one word." I let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. One word tells you a lot when it's the right word. He took a step closer. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it?" He opened his mouth, paused, recalculated. I watched him searching for the version of the truth that would cost him the least. "That night was stupid," he said finally. "The guys were pushing, everybody was drinking, and I said something flippant. That's it." "No," I said, "that wasn't it. That was just the first time I heard out loud what you've been showing me for 2 years. His jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." "Maybe," I said, "but not wrong." He looked at my car like he expected it to become our car the second this conversation exhausted me enough. "So what, that's it? 2 years and you throw it away because your feelings got hurt?" I stared at him, not because I didn't know what to say, because some part of me was still mourning the fact that this was the best he had. "My feelings didn't get hurt, Ethan." My voice came out quiet and level. My reality changed. He scoffed. "You can't just end something real over one bad moment." I unlocked the driver's side door. Then I looked him in the eye and said, "That's the problem. You think one bad moment is what ended this. I think one honest moment exposed it." His expression hardened. "You're overreacting, and you're still underestimating me." He stared at me, waiting for me to soften. I didn't. Finally, he said, "Fine, go. But don't expect me to beg because you decided to make everything into some dramatic social statement." I held his gaze for one last beat. Then I got into my car, shut the door, and left him standing under the restaurant lights in a tailored coat and borrowed dignity. I wish I could say I drove home blasting some triumphant song, feeling powerful and certain and transformed. I didn't. I drove home in silence with my hands clenched around the wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. I cried at 2 red lights and again while trying to get my key into my apartment door. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing earrings and heels, and stared at the wine glass drying by the sink like it belonged to another woman's life. Relief and grief are awful together. They blur. They make you second-guess things that should have been obvious. At 1:14 in the morning, Ethan texted, "This was insane." At 1:19, "You embarrassed both of us." At 1:26, "Call me when you're ready to act like an adult." I didn't answer. The next morning, I woke up with a headache behind my eyes and 32 notifications on my phone. 3 missed calls from Ethan, 2 from Nolan, 1 from Mason. A text from my friend Rachel that just said, "Are you okay? Also, I am profoundly on your side." That one made me smile for the first time since the restaurant. Ethan's messages started mild enough. "Can we talk? You took what I said out of context. I didn't think you'd go nuclear over this." Then came the pivot, exactly the way these things always pivot when remorse doesn't immediately get them what they want. "Do you realize how bad you made me look? My mom saw that post. My coworkers saw that post. People are acting like I cheated on you." I read those 3 twice. Not because they were confusing, because they clarified everything. Even now, even after being caught, he was still most disturbed by the audience. Not my hurt, not the betrayal, not the fact that the woman who loved him had sat alone under a candle while he arrived nearly an hour late and still somehow thought he was the victim. By noon, he had switched strategies. At 12:07 p.m., there was a knock at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Ethan standing there holding 2 paper grocery bags in both arms, like some overacted apology scene from a streaming drama written by a man who had never actually apologized to a woman. He knew I was home. My car was in the lot. "Chloe," he called through the door, voice softer now. "I know you're in there." I stayed silent. "I brought stuff to make dinner." Still silence. Another pause. Then, "I'm trying here." I almost opened the door. That's the embarrassing part. Not because I still wanted him back. Because history trains your body to respond to familiar patterns before your mind catches up. But then I thought about him saying comfortable in that lazy, amused voice. I thought about Placeholder. I thought about all the times I had accepted less because he packaged it in charm. So I didn't move. Eventually, I heard the bag settle gently against the floor outside my door. A few seconds later, his final attempt. Ghosting me is immature, Chloe. Then footsteps, then silence. I waited 10 full minutes before opening the door. The groceries sat there with a folded note tucked under one handle. "I know you're hurt, but we can fix this. Don't let one misunderstanding ruin something good. E." I picked up the bags and brought them inside. Then I checked what he'd bought. Wrong pasta. The sauce brand I'm allergic to. A cheap bottle of white wine I don't drink. And no garlic bread, because Ethan was always cutting carbs after 6 and unconsciously assumed everyone else should too. I just stood there in my kitchen and laughed. Not kindly. Not because it was funny. Because even his apology was still centered around himself. He didn't know me. Not really. He knew my usefulness. He knew my availability. He knew which version of me appeared when he needed soothing, support, flexibility, forgiveness. But the actual details of me, the human woman behind the labor, he had never learned her at all. The anger text started that night. "Hope your little performance was worth it. People think I'm dating a psycho now. Rachel unfollowed me, by the way. Real classy. You could have just talked to me privately." Then the one he clearly expected to get under my skin. Serena reached out. At least she knows how to communicate like an adult. I stared at that message for a few seconds, then set my phone face down on the couch beside me. That was the thing about Ethan. He mistook reaction for value. If he could still provoke me, he could still convince himself he mattered in the way he wanted to matter. So I gave him nothing. No screaming text, no paragraph, no late-night call, no chance to reshape himself into Yira the Wounded One. Instead, I made tea. And while the kettle hissed, I changed the passwords on every account he had been using through me for the better part of 2 years. Netflix, Spotify, Disney+, Hulu, the premium grocery delivery app, the shared calendar, even the meal planning subscription he'd once laughed at paying for, because in his words, "You're already so good at organizing all that domestic stuff." I removed his devices one by one. It was almost meditative. A clean little severing. At 11:48 p.m., my phone rang. "Ethan." I let it ring out. At 11:51, he called again. Then again. On the 4th call, I answered. "What?" I said. His voice came through sharp and incredulous. "Did you seriously lock me out of everything?" "Yes." I was in the middle of a series. I leaned against the kitchen counter and closed my eyes. Of all the possible openings, that was the one he chose. "I know," I said. "I removed you mid-episode on purpose." "You're unbelievable." "No," I said. "I'm just no longer subsidizing a man who called me a placeholder." He let out this furious, disbelieving sound. "So now you're being petty." I looked at the dark window over my sink, at my own reflection, faintly visible in it. Petty would have been changing all your playlists to breakup songs. There was silence. Then, bitterly, "You know what? Maybe my friends were right about you." I smiled to myself, though there was no joy in it. "That's okay," I said. "Mine were right about you." And I hung up. The next complication arrived wearing perfume and maternal disappointment. Linda Mercer had always loved me. Ethan's mother was the kind of woman who wore tailored white blouses to casual lunches and somehow made everyone around her feel both hugged and assessed. We had never been truly close, but she was warm with me in a way that felt sincere. She remembered details, asked follow-up questions, sent me articles about books I'd mentioned wanting to read. More than once during our relationship, she had looked at Ethan with half-mocking exasperation and said, "Don't ruin this one. She's better than your usual chaos." At 9:13 the next morning, she texted, "Chloe, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted to check on you. Ethan says there was a misunderstanding. Your post suggested otherwise. Are you all right?" I sat with that for several minutes. There's always a moment after a breakup where you decide whether you're still going to protect the person who hurt you. I had done enough protecting. So I answered honestly, not dramatically, not vindictively. I told her what I overheard, that he called me comfortable, that he called me a placeholder, that he arrived nearly an hour late to our anniversary dinner and still treated my response as the greater offense. Her reply came 6 minutes later. I am so sorry. Then a second text. You did not deserve that. And a third. I need to speak with my son. I set the phone down and felt something loosen in my chest. Not vindication exactly. Just the relief of no longer carrying his version of events by default. An hour later, Ethan called. I didn't answer. He texted instead. Did you talk to my mother? A minute later. Seriously, Chloe? Then, you're turning people against me now? I typed back exactly one sentence. I told the truth when she asked. He didn't respond for 27 minutes. Then, she just canceled the family lake trip because apparently I need to sit with the consequences of my behavior. Are you happy now? I read that message twice. Then I put my phone down and went to water the basil plant on my windowsill. That was another thing I was beginning to understand. Peace is not always dramatic. Sometimes peace looks like choosing not to attend every war you're invited to. For 3 days, things quieted. Not fully, but enough to make me suspicious. I went to work, answered emails, took Rachel's calls, cried once in the shower and once in the cereal aisle because Ethan's favorite brand was on sale and grief is humiliating like that. I also started noticing the shape of my life without him, how quiet my apartment was, how much less tense my shoulders felt by evening, how I could choose dinner based on what I wanted without accounting for someone else's preferences, mood, or calorie phase. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was space. Then Saturday happened. I was at my gym, halfway through a set of squats, when I caught sight of Ethan in the wall-length mirror. He wasn't alone. Serena was with him. Of course she was. She looked exactly like the version of herself that had lived in the corners of our relationship. Expensive ponytail, impossible waist, matching athletic set, face arranged in that polished expression. Some women perfect when they know they're being watched. And Ethan looked delighted by being seen with her. Not happy, not peaceful, displayed. That distinction mattered. He made sure they set up one rack over from me, close enough to be noticed, far enough to pretend it was accidental. I kept my headphones in and focused on my form. Then Serena laughed too loudly at something he said. A bright, rehearsed laugh. Not the kind that escapes you, the kind you release like perfume. Ethan glanced towards me in the mirror. So that was the game. Rachel, who had come with me that morning, leaned close and muttered, "Please tell me he did not bring the ex to your gym as performance art." I kept my eyes forward. Apparently he did. Oh, I hate him creatively now. A minute later, Ethan moved to the bench press area and started loading far more weight than I had ever seen him lift. Serena perched nearby, all long legs and strategic admiration. "Babe," she said loud enough for the state of New Jersey to hear, "you make this look easy." Rachel nearly choked on her water bottle. I adjusted the clips on my bar and refused to look over. But refusing to look doesn't stop you from hearing the sequence unfold. The grunt, the shaky descent, the sudden clatter and panic. When I finally glanced up, Ethan was pinned awkwardly under the bar while two guys rushed over to help him re-rack it. Serena stepped back so fast it was almost athletic. One of the trainers came over immediately, voice clipped and professional. Rachel leaned toward me and whispered, and there it is. Male ego, live and local. I shouldn't have smiled. I did. A few minutes later, Ethan and Serena were asked to leave after an argument with staff about respect and hostility that I suspect was mostly about being loud, disruptive, and embarrassing. He shot me one last furious look on the way out, as if gravity itself had conspired with me personally. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. "Hope you enjoyed the show." I looked at the message, then at Rachel. She raised an eyebrow. "You gonna answer?" I thought for a second. Then I typed, "You always did care more about appearances than substance." I sent it before I could reconsider. His reply came instantly. "You're cold." I stared at those words. Cold, after everything. After being used, diminished, made secondary in my own relationship. Cold was the label he reached for because warmth was no longer available to him. I locked my phone and slid it into my bag. Rachel slung her arm through mine as we headed for smoothies after the gym. "You know what the problem is?" she said. "He genuinely thought losing you would be temporary." I looked ahead through the bright glass doors into a day that suddenly felt wider than it had in weeks. "Yeah," I said. "He did." And that was the first moment I realized Ethan hadn't actually believed I would leave. Not in a final way, not in a way that removed access, not in a way that forced him to experience me as a person instead of a resource. He thought I would circle back, calm down, miss him more than I missed my dignity. He still thought this was a phase. He had no idea it was a boundary. By the end of that week, Ethan still believed this was temporary. I could feel it in the way he texted, not like a man who had lost something, like a man waiting for something to reset. And when it didn't, that's when everything shifted, because there's a specific kind of person who doesn't know how to process rejection without turning it into a performance. And Ethan had always been very good at performing. It started with Serena, or more specifically, it ended with Serena. 9 days. That's how long their reconnection lasted. I didn't hear that from him. I heard it from Serena herself. She messaged me on a Thursday night at 10:32 p.m. No greeting. No politeness. Just, you can have him back. I stared at the message, confused for half a second before everything clicked into place. I typed back, I don't want him. 3 dots appeared instantly. Disappeared. Then reappeared. Finally, he wouldn't stop talking about you. Not in a good way. I almost laughed. Of course not in a good way. Men like Ethan don't praise what they've lost. They dissect it, minimize it, try to shrink it back into something manageable. But obsession doesn't care about tone. It just needs focus. Serena sent one more message. Good luck, you'll need it. Then she blocked me. I sat there on my couch, phone in my hand, and let out a slow breath. 9 days. 2 years reduced to 9 days of comparison. That should have hurt. Instead, it clarified something important. I had never been competing with Serena. Ethan had been competing with the version of himself he thought he was when he was with her. And I had just been the person standing nearby while he tried to convince himself he'd settled. 2 days later, he decided I owed him a conversation. That word again. Owed. As if love was a debt I hadn't finished paying. I got a text from Mia, a mutual friend I actually liked. Hey, random question. Are you free Saturday morning? I could really use help moving a few boxes. I'll buy you coffee and pastries. That didn't feel suspicious. Mia wasn't dramatic, didn't play games, didn't orbit Ethan the way Nolan and the others did. So I said yes. Saturday morning, 9 a.m., I pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building with a travel mug in my hand and zero emotional armor. That was my first mistake. The second I stepped inside her unit, I knew. Not because Ethan jumped out dramatically. Because of the energy. Too staged, too quiet. And then I saw him, standing in the middle of the living room like he'd been placed there deliberately. Hairstyled, shirt pressed, full presence activated. Like this was a meeting he had rehearsed for. Oh, I said flatly. I didn't know you'd be here. Mia looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. I'm so sorry, she said quickly. He told me you knew. I didn't, I said. Ethan stepped forward immediately, voice controlled, almost gentle. Can we talk? I turned toward the door. No. He moved faster than I expected and stepped in front of me. Chloe, don't do this. Don't do what? I asked. Respect my own boundaries? You're being unreasonable. I let out a short breath. There it is. What? That thing you do, I said, where you decide how I'm allowed to feel. Mia hovered awkwardly near the kitchen, clearly regretting every life choice that led to this moment. Ethan gestured toward a box on the floor. I brought your stuff. I glanced at it. A cardboard box with Chloe written across the side in thick black marker. I hadn't asked for anything back. And judging by the size of it, neither had he. I don't want it, I said. You should at least check it, he insisted. There might be things that matter. I walked over slowly and flipped open the top. Inside was a random collection of nothing. An old t-shirt, a charger I didn't recognize, a half-used bottle of perfume that wasn't even mine, a book I had never read. It was a prop, not a return, a reason, something to justify contact. I closed the box. Are we done here? I asked. No, he snapped, composure cracking slightly. We're not done. We are. You don't get to decide that alone. I laughed. Actually laughed. You decided what I was alone, Ethan. I'm just accepting it. His jaw tightened. I gave you 2 years of my life. And I gave you mine, I said. The difference is I meant it. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's accurate. He stepped closer, voice rising now. Do you have any idea how many women I turned down for you? I blinked. Not because it shocked me, because it confirmed exactly who he was. Was I supposed to be grateful? I asked softly. That you chose me as your placeholder? His expression snapped. That's not what you were. You said it was. I said that in a different context. There is no context where that word means something good. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. You're twisting everything. I'm remembering it clearly. Silence stretched between us. Then he said something that almost impressed me with its audacity. I'm going to sue you. I stared at him. For what? Emotional damage, he said. My therapist says what you did qualifies as psychological harm. I let out a slow breath and looked over at Mia. Is he serious? She looked like she might cry. I think he's been spiraling a little. I nodded. That tracked. I turned back to Ethan. Your therapist, I said carefully. Is that still Nolan's cousin who took one psychology class and now runs an Instagram page? His face went red. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think this is predictable. He snapped. Not dramatically, but enough. His voice raised, sharp, loud enough that I saw movement in the hallway outside the apartment door. You don't get to walk away like this, he shouted. You don't get to just decide I don't matter anymore. There it was. Not love. Not apology. Not regret. Control. I picked up my keys. I'm not deciding you don't matter, I said. I'm deciding you don't get access. I walked toward the door. He didn't stop me this time. Maybe because Mia stepped between us. Maybe because something in my face finally made it clear there was nothing left to negotiate. Behind me, I heard him say one last thing. You're going to regret this. I paused at the door, not turning around, just long enough to answer. I already regret staying as long as I did. Then I left. If that had been the end of it, this story would have been clean. Painful, but clean. It wasn't, because Ethan didn't know how to lose quietly. And when people like that run out of emotional leverage, they look for other ways to force a reaction. Monday morning, my manager called me into his office. Hey, Chloe, he said, looking more confused than concerned. I got a strange call this morning. My stomach dropped slightly. What kind of strange? He leaned back in his chair. Some guy claiming you have property of his worth thousands of dollars. Said he might need to involve legal if it's not returned. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them. Did he say his name? Ethan Mercer. Of course he did. I pulled out my phone and handed it over. Scroll up, I said. He did. Through messages, through timestamps, through Ethan's own words. Placeholder. You're overreacting. You embarrassed me. My manager read quietly for about 30 seconds. Then he looked up. So, he said slowly, he's mad you won't let him treat you like a doormat anymore. Pretty much. He nodded. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Good for you. Relief flooded through me so fast it almost made me dizzy. Thank you. Also, he added, handing my phone back. If he calls again, I'll tell him we don't mediate breakups here. I laughed. Actually laughed. And just like that, Ethan lost another audience. But he wasn't done. Not even close. Because when private pressure fails, people like Ethan go public. 3 days later, Rachel sent me a link. You need to see this. I clicked it. It was a TikTok. Ethan, sitting in his car, sunlight hitting him just right, expression carefully curated somewhere between wounded and dignified. The caption read, Day 12 of trying to get my ex to communicate like an adult. I stared at the screen as he spoke. I got left at a restaurant on our anniversary, he said calmly, over something I said as a joke to my friends, and now she refuses to even have a conversation. He shook his head slightly. I just think it's wild how people will throw away real relationships instead of working through things. He paused, then added, but I guess some people aren't ready for that level of emotional maturity. I let the video finish. Then I looked at the comments. They were not what he expected. You called her a placeholder. What did you think would happen? So you're mad she believed you? Sir, you told on yourself. Team Chloe. I leaned back into my couch, something like calm settling into my chest. Rachel texted. Internet said nope. I typed back. For once, the internet got it right. He deleted the video 6 hours later, but not before it reached enough people to make something very clear. He wasn't losing because of me. He was losing because of himself. The final escalation came on a Friday night. At 7:12 p.m., I got a notification. Ethan Mercer requested $847. I blinked. Opened it. Description. Half of anniversary dinner, plus Uber, plus emotional stress, plus therapy. I actually laughed out loud. Not quietly. Not politely. Full, disbelieving laughter in the middle of my living room. I declined it. Then added a note. Placeholders don't split bills. He sent it again. I declined again. New note. Ex-placeholders don't either. He sent it 3 more times. By the 5th request, I sighed, opened the app, and sent him $3.50. With the note, gas money for driving to the restaurant. Keep the change. He lost it. 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 1 from a blocked number. Crying, angry, desperate, accusing me of being cruel, of financially abusing him now, of ruining his reputation. I listened to 1 voicemail. Then I stopped. Not because it didn't affect me, because I finally understood something simple. Closure doesn't come from hearing them explain. It comes from no longer needing them to. I blocked the number, set my phone down. And for the first time since that night at the restaurant, I felt something close to peace. Not because everything was resolved, but because I was no longer participating. A month passed. Not dramatically. Not in some cinematic rush of healing and glow-ups and perfect clarity. Just quietly. Day by day, my life stopped orbiting Ethan. I stopped checking my phone first thing in the morning. Stopped replaying conversations in the shower. Stopped imagining alternate endings where he suddenly understood, suddenly changed, suddenly became the man I had spent 2 years hoping he would be. That version of him didn't exist. And once I accepted that, everything else got lighter. I started doing small things differently. I signed up for a cooking class on Tuesday nights. The first session was awkward. Too many strangers. Too much polite smiling. But by the second week, I realized something almost embarrassing. I had spent 2 years cooking almost exclusively what Ethan liked. Low-carb dinners, high-protein meals, minimal sauces. Now I was standing in a bright kitchen, laughing with a woman named Denise about how much garlic was too much garlic. There is no such thing. Learning how to make fresh pasta that actually tasted like something. It felt like reclaiming space. I joined a weekend hiking group. Applied for a promotion I had put off because Ethan used to complain that I worked too much. Started reading again at night instead of waiting for him to call. None of it was dramatic, but it added up. Piece by piece, I was becoming someone who existed fully in her own life again. That's where I met Noah Carter. He was 10 minutes late to our first date, and he apologized. Not casually, not with a shrug. Genuinely. "I'm so sorry," he said as he slid into the chair across from me at a small Italian place near the cooking studio. One of my patients needed extra time before discharge. I didn't want to rush them out just to be on time. I blinked. "You're a nurse?" I asked. "Pediatric," he said, a little sheepish. "So, yeah, timing gets flexible." 10 minutes. He apologized for 10 minutes. I had spent 2 years adjusting my entire schedule around someone who thought being almost an hour late to an anniversary dinner was normal. Perspective is a powerful thing. Dinner with Noah was easy, not performative, not strategic. Not a conversation I had to carefully steer to avoid triggering ego or defensiveness. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He laughed, not loudly, not to be noticed, just naturally. And when I told him cautiously about the placeholder situation, he leaned back in his chair, shook his head, and said, "So let me get this straight. Some guy fumbled a woman who cooks, plans thoughtful dates, and knows her own worth, and thought he could just circle back whenever he felt like it?" I smiled, a little surprised. "That's one way to put it." He grinned. His loss. Simple. Clean. No analysis, no minimizing. Just truth. We didn't rush anything. No grand announcements, no curated posts. Just dinners, conversations, and a growing sense that I didn't have to earn basic respect anymore. I didn't think about Ethan much. Not in the obsessive way I used to. More like a closed chapter I occasionally glanced at just to remind myself how far I'd come. Until the universe decided to be ironic. 3 weeks into seeing Noah, we ran into Ethan. Of course we did. It happened at a boutique in the same plaza as the hospital where Noah worked. We had stopped in because I needed a dress for an upcoming work event. I was halfway through debating between two options when I heard a voice I recognized instantly. "Oh my God, sorry!" Something clattered. I turned, and there he was. Ethan, standing behind a display he had just knocked over, boxes of shoes scattered across the floor. For a second, he just stared at me. Then his eyes shifted to Noah, and something in his expression cracked. He recovered quickly. Of course he did. People like Ethan always try to recover. "Chloe," he said too casually. "Wow, didn't expect to see you here." I gave a small polite nod. "Hi, Ethan." No anger, no tension. Just distance. He glanced at Noah again, sizing him up in that quick, silent way men do. "And you are?" he asked. "Noah," Noah said easily, extending a hand. Ethan hesitated for half a second before shaking it. "Ethan," he replied, "Chloe's ex." "I gathered," Noah said, still calm. The air shifted, subtle, but undeniable. Ethan turned back to me, smile tightening. "So," he said, a little louder now, "still doing the whole dramatic exit thing?" I tilted my head slightly. "Still misunderstanding basic respect?" Noah glanced between us, then leaned closer to me and murmured just loud enough to be heard. "Is he okay?" I almost laughed. Ethan didn't. His composure slipped. "Excuse me?" he snapped. Noah straightened, still relaxed. "I just mean," he said evenly, "anyone who calls a woman like Chloe a placeholder probably isn't operating at full capacity." Silence. Heavy. Electric. Ethan's face went through 3 emotions in rapid succession. Shock. Anger. Something dangerously close to humiliation. "You told him?" he said, looking at me. "That's private." I raised an eyebrow. "You made a TikTok about it. That's different." "Is it?" He stepped closer, voice rising. "You've been dragging my name for weeks. I didn't move. No, Ethan, I said calmly. You've been dragging yourself. That did it. The last thread of control snapped. He grabbed one of the shoes from the fallen display, actually grabbed it, and for one surreal second, I thought he was going to throw it. At me. At Noah. At something. Security intervened before he could. 2 employees stepped in quickly, voices firm but controlled, guiding him toward the exit while he protested loudly about being disrespected and not doing anything wrong. The entire store was watching. I didn't look away, not out of cruelty, out of closure. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one being diminished. He was, by his own actions. He was fired 2 days later. I didn't find that out from him. I found out from Linda. She called me that evening, her voice tired but steady. I wanted to apologize, she said. For what? I asked gently. For thinking he would learn faster than this. I didn't know what to say to that. So I said the truth. You're not responsible for who he chooses to be. There was a long pause. Then she sighed. I'm changing the locks, she said quietly, and I'm stepping back. He needs consequences more than he needs excuses. I closed my eyes for a moment. That sounds like the right choice. I'm sorry, Chloe, she added. You deserve better from him. I know, I said, and for the first time I really meant it. That should have been the end. But life has a strange sense of timing, because 3 nights later I got a text. Unknown number. I almost didn't open it. Almost. Chloe, it's Ethan. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. Then I read the rest. I'm sorry. I didn't understand what I had. I thought I had time. I thought you'd always be there. You weren't a placeholder. You were the real thing, and I was too stupid to see it. I know you've moved on. I just needed you to know that I get it now. I hope he treats you the way you deserve. I read it twice, slowly, carefully, not because I was tempted, because I wanted to understand how it felt. And the answer was strange. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like distance, like reading a letter addressed to a version of me that no longer existed. I thought about replying. Something polite, something final, something that tied everything neatly together. Then I remembered something Noah had said on our second date. The right person won't make you wonder if you're enough. They'll wonder if they're enough for you. I looked down at Ethan's message one last time. Then I deleted it, blocked the number, and set my phone aside. Some people learn too late, not because they couldn't have learned earlier, but because they didn't have to. Not until the consequences were real. Not until the person who made their life easier stopped being available. Ethan was right about one thing. I was never a placeholder. I was just temporarily misplaced, with someone who couldn't recognize my value. Now, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with someone who never once made me question if I was enough. And somehow, that makes all the difference.